Welcome to Telltales. I'm Mike Nicoletti. Every week, along with my co-hosts Jason Wallace and Hunt Lawrence, we bring you the Cashflow Memo. Get it at telltales.us. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive deep into energy, technology, and healthcare. So download the memo now and get started.
The following conversation is intended for informational purposes only. You should always do your own work to determine if an investment is suitable for you.
We have plenty of other things to cover beside the energy side, so I'll hurry through it. Nothing new on the price of oil, except, of course, the missiles in the air in Israel are probably holding a couple of dollars higher than it otherwise would be. How to work the surplus capacity, mostly with Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, into the market is still undecided. So that a lot of people who follow oil are shorting. And the impact there is if things get too much worse in the Mideast, you'll have a short covering rally. Probably doesn't mean too much. You turn to Exhibit B, gas is behaving better. At least the current contract's up in the 260, 270 area. That pretty much supports the forecast in the table with supply and demand. Hopefully that holds out and you don't see more of that low $2 price. We had the vice president debate last night. Not too much attention to how to reduce spending or reduce the deficit. It's been here for a couple of weeks, but anyone who's just tuning in this Wednesday, the longest time, fiscal 24, which ended Monday, I was saying that we were holding to a number from earlier in the year of 1.6 trillion. I was saying it was because there must be student loan forgiveness in the 1.9 estimate. I had pulled together more recent CBO stuff, and it really is 1.9. It's just quite incredible. It gives rounded numbers. Our revenue is 5 trillion and our spending is darn near 7. So we borrowed 2 trillion. I mean, that is not sustainable. And whoever's elected on November 5th is going to have to deal with it. Anything to add, Mike or Jason?
No, I don't think so. I mean, my takeaway from the debate was nobody's probably going to change their mind. I don't know that undecided voters will really care about the VP debate.
Yeah. We've been really Jason's idea, I think, or at least Mike and I appointed him. But we've been covering the Magnificent Seven, or actually by the time we're finished, it'll be 8 or 9, and looking at where the soft spots were, the flaws, not to chase anyone out of any of these positions, or to not to take it off your watch list if you're watching it, if you want to acquire some. But the risk in these companies, if you go to page 1, is they do tend to trade for 30 times or more times free cash flow, and that requires some growth. And these potential problems with these companies could cause that, to just have 2, 3, 4 years flat. For example, that's more or less what's happened to Apple. So that's what we're identifying. The first one we did was Apple, and I know I quote each week what Jason said, but the product day was disappointing. And I said, look, and he liked best was earplugs, which could use as hearing aids. So pretty condemning of the Apple product day. And he had been ready to make the case or problems with the Alphabet franchise. We did that the second time. And then last week we did Amazon's. You're down, all these are on page 1. And I guess to summarize Amazon with some really detailed analysis and thought by Jason and Mike, Amazon's a pretty strong franchise. And so we keep it a secret which one we're doing. And I think we're doing Meta today. Just a little history of our views of Meta. Meta's all the way over on page 4 next to Netflix and Walt Disney. I don't quite why it's there and not on page 1, but that's where it is. Maybe that's where it resides. It was, the time these numbers were updated was $500. It's now about $560 or $570. It's near its high, set new highs. When we did these numbers, we were 34 times free cash flow. really has had kind of a comeback. You can see in terms of deploying their free cash flow, whether it's NVIDIA or Meta, whenever anyone has a lot of cash flow, they start a dividend, and then they do a lot of stock repurchase. The numbers for the 6 months are pretty strong. I mean, the free cash flow is up 30%, $10 billion. So at least statistically, it looks very strong. Jason, I think you're the best of the three of us at kind of picking the soft spots in these franchises. Where do you see the potential for Meta running into some headwinds and kind of just flatlining in the $30 billion a year of free cash flow?
Yeah, I kind of see two soft spots. The first one is their their traditional product. You think Facebook and their family of apps. The consumer is fickle, and every generation seems to choose a new platform for their social media. Gen Z chose TikTok, so not in the Meta family of apps. If you think back, Meta was called Facebook. They built Facebook. It's the largest social network. Then through acquisition, they acquired their next two platforms in Instagram and WhatsApp. Certainly in the environment now and maybe into the near future, it's unlikely they'll be able to get an acquisition done acquiring another social platform. So if they don't organically build one, they might get left behind from the next one, whatever comes after TikTok, what the next generation chooses. And then Mike brought up, we were talking about this a little earlier, and Mike brought up the point is they have this model of fast following, which Zuckerberg openly admits now that they'll just copy the app that's gaining traction, and they can throw a lot more resources at it than a startup. There's still no guarantee that users adopt it. And the point I was thinking about is their user base is aging. So, it's kind of Gen X using Facebook, millennials are using Instagram, and then they don't have Gen Z. And as those age groups get older, maybe they're using social media a little less. And then if Meta wants to fast follow with the next new app, as they try to do with Threads, they push their current user base into that new app. So if they are losing the younger generations, their demographics might end up looking something like China's demographics, right? So maybe in 10 years, since we're talking, make the case for these companies to not be larger in 10 years, maybe in 10 years time, the millennial generation is largely aged out of a lot of use of social media platforms, and they never captured Gen Z or Gen Alpha. And they're losing that demographic, which is their prime market. I'll pause there, Mike, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think they're in a better position to do the fast follow. Like I think the TikTok thing sort of scared them, and I expect that any other competitive social network will also be copied by Meta, and probably better and faster and sooner than they had in the past. They've now tried this once with Threads, and it's hard to say whether it's really going very well because they're not monetizing it. Typically, Facebook doesn't monetize a property unless it's got at least 1 billion users. So that's a high hurdle. So when it comes to whether the next generation will get on the next version of whatever Facebook is or Meta's product is, Jason's right. We just don't know. These things can be sort of trendy, but I think an incumbent position is probably pretty favorable. Jason, if you're all right with leaving it there, I think we should move to their relative position as compared to Apple, because Zuckerberg's very blatantly said Apple is going to be their largest competitor going forward, and you got to break that down and say what do they mean by that. So it helps to think about the history. So initially, when Facebook started, everybody used this product on the desktop, and a desktop computer doesn't have any constraints necessarily. Basically, they built early, call it Web 2.0 web applications that users access through a browser. So there's very little constraints that were put on Facebook in the process of building their apps. So if they could make it work in a browser, they could get it in front of a computer and in front of a person. When they shifted to mobile, this was a big problem for them. First of all, everybody thought it was going to be impossible to do advertising. Previously, they had a bar on the right, kind of the way Google used to do the 10 blue links. And that was the way that they would advertise, but the mobile screen wasn't big enough. Well, Apple or Meta figured that out by placing ads in the feed. But what the challenge for them is that Apple became a limiting factor in their ability to innovate and develop on the product. Every time they needed to release a new version of the product, Apple and actually Google as well, through the Android App Store, those two app stores require review processes, and Apple has not been shy about the fact that they're not happy that they don't capture a portion of the revenue that Meta generates from advertising. So many of these tech companies have projects in development over long periods of time. They refer to them frequently as knobs that they can turn when they need to monetize a particular asset. I think that if Apple were pushed into a position where they needed growth, they would very likely monetize advertising that occurs through their app store. And I think that could come potentially as soon as when the ruling comes down from the Google antitrust case that may prevent Apple from receiving a $20 billion payment from Google. The logical move for Apple in that point in time is not only to institute a revenue share process for search engines, but also to institute a revenue share process for all advertising-based applications that run on the iPhone. So I think that is what Mark Zuckerberg is afraid of. So taking this the next step further, the thought process is obviously to figure out what the next platform shift's going to be and win that platform. And Zuckerberg notoriously went down the path of rebranding the company Meta, thinking that the metaverse was going to be the next big thing. Well, that hasn't really happened yet. They've invested a ton of money, and there's not exactly a ton of usage of this metaverse stuff. But at the same time, we've had this explosion in generative AI. And that has sort of become this enabler potentially of a metaverse or whatever the next platform is going to be. So I think that the risk for Meta is that they're so dependent on Apple today that if Apple were to do something adverse to them, it would severely affect their cash flow. And two, Apple's in a sort of enviable position as the existing platform. They probably don't have to spend as much money in the short term to be competitive for the next platform. So I think they're in a tricky situation, but they're probably, of the big tech companies next to Tesla, probably the best at executing. So yeah, I know I dumped a lot of information there. So Jason and Hunt, if you want to chime in or ask some more questions, I think that's basically my thesis.
Yeah. What kind of market share you think Thread has against Twitter?
Oh, I think it's pretty small. It depends on how you measure it. If you measure it as users, it probably looks better than it does if you measure it based on the amount of usage. So I don't think it's really a threat to Twitter today.
What kind of a threat does Twitter represent, or X, I guess we should call it? What kind of what kind of a threat in terms of digital advertising, whether it be Meta or Google or Amazon or whoever else is trying to get more market share in digital advertising? Do you think Twitter is gaining ground or losing ground, or what do you think the prospect for Twitter is?
Well, there's only one way to go when it comes to Twitter advertising or X advertising, and that would be up, because things have not gone so well. I will say, and I didn't cover this earlier, one of the examples of the things that Apple has done that has made Meta's life hard was institute app tracking transparency. And we talked about this quite a bit when it happened, but the important thing to remember is that basically Apple changed the rules on the way that you communicate between apps and the open web in an effort to, quote unquote, preserve privacy. But what it also did was shut down the ability to track the efficacy of conversion of an advertisement. So you're scrolling on Instagram, you click an ad for a product, you go to the website, you buy the product. It basically made it impossible to confirm that the purchase of that product came from the placement of the particular ad. Well, the unintended consequence of that is that Meta was the only company that was really in a position to spend the money to figure out how to do attribution when without in a post-app tracking transparency world. It's a mouthful. So basically what that meant is that going forward, the ROI on advertising at Meta is actually better. So it's sort of like when government institutes regulation, typically the bigger players, the incumbents, become more ingrained. And that's basically what Apple's done to Meta. So Snapchat, X, both of them have trouble as far as establishing app tracking, establishing the relationship between advertisements and purchases. Both of those tend to have more, quote unquote, brand advertising rather than direct all the way through the funnel advertising, which Meta is pretty, I think they're easily the best when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think Meta hit a local maxima at, when they could attribute the clicks through the breadcrumbs to the purchase. And they had no reason to move off that hill. But Apple pushed them off the hill, and now they've used AI to attribute the clicks to the purchase, or the viewing of the ad to the purchase. And now they're in they've climbed a higher hill, right? So they're more at a global maxima.
Right, and that required a significant investment in NVIDIA GPUs. So it's interesting that pushed them to a place where they were actually well positioned to be a leader in generative AI as well.
Yeah, so they're probably the best at predicting and tracking user behavior around the internet now.
Jason, who's in the lead? Who has more GPUs in operation now? Do you think Meta has as many as Google, or what? Who do you think has more 800s deployed?
I don't know. Microsoft and OpenAI have bought quite a lot of them. Tesla will tell you they have the largest cluster, the largest supercomputer built using those GPUs. And Meta's been a huge buyer for a long, long time. So maybe over the years that maybe they have accumulated the most. It's hard to say. I guess one point I was going to bring up to expand on Mike's comments about Meta wanting to own the next platform is they put $10 billion to work annually for Reality Labs. So that's their AR VR division. And all told, the estimates are they've spent $46 billion on that division. So they're trying to make that market. They're trying to make that platform. And it's conceivable that they end up spending, $100 billion to make that market. And then Apple comes in and fast follows and builds a device, maybe of a more polished product, whatever that product ends up looking like, and gets to the same outcome without having to spend $100 billion. Yep.
Other news on the companies on the early part of the memo, page 1, or when we treat them with these, one company each week, we want to be careful not to have half of the 30 minutes on the company. Any news or developments on Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, or Tesla?
I think on Microsoft related tangential is the OpenAI funding round, which with that came the requirement that the company convert from a not-for-profit to a for-profit and remove the investment multiple cap. If you remember that prior investments into the for-profit side of OpenAI were capped at 100x return. Part of the requirements of this new funding round is removing that and actually scrapping the whole not-for-profit side of it. It will become a public benefit corporation, which is really just a C Corp, where I believe, and my understanding is that the board of directors also has some fiduciary duty to adhere to other things. And presumably that will be something to do with AI safety or something like that. There's more companies that are doing this public benefit corporation structure. And it's one of those things that hasn't been tested too much for too long. And at some point, a company's going to get sued for not adhering to their stated mission and goals. So I don't really know what to think about that. I mean, I have been thinking about it a lot lately because I keep coming across with more companies that have embraced this structure. But with all things, you don't really know the true impact until things really go south. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. The other piece with OpenAI is they lost 3 or 4 more of their top employees. And it's not clear whether that's just because these people are cashing out in this financing round and they are now more than wealthy enough to retire and do whatever you want, or what the reason is. But if you go back not many months, there was the coup that nearly ousted Sam Altman from OpenAI, and everybody was going to leave and go to Microsoft. The statement was OpenAI is nothing without its people. So now you see its people leaving in droves, and you wonder, what's going on here.
Is it nothing?
Maybe, but at the same time, the company's released this new GPT-01 model, which actually is probably the most interesting thing that's happened. I think it kind of lays the path for what Apple's looking to do as the orchestration layer, where a model sits on top and basically asks itself questions and then orchestrates out the work to different models that are good at different things. And the result is much better answers. So, there's a lot of moving parts of what's going on here, but OpenAI continues to be sort of this governance nightmare, and maybe this funding round solves it. But then it begs the question of is the correct startup optimal governance structure actually to start as a not-for-profit and then convert to a for-profit, or be for-profit and then later convert to not-for-profit? There's kind of interesting implications of their decision to change the structure of the business.
Okay, let's take a quick break for a message from Oak Cliff Sailing.
Hi, it's Wednesday again, and there's a lot going on. This time what we have the Melgis that have back from Stamford Yacht Club, and they're headed out to the White Bread series in the golf cart, headed down to Far 40 Black to grab the mast and get the boat out of the water and off the keel. This lovely trailer and Clifford the Red truck combo are headed to Newport with River, the dog, to get the sales from OC86 because she did not sell. She's still available. Tonight is the last Wednesday night of the series, and then tomorrow, Thursday night, match racing drills will happen. And during the day, the kids were out pickling an engine and getting it started. Any other organization getting an engine on a Par 40 started after it had been seized would be major. For Oak Cliff, it's just a Tuesday. So you never know what's going to be happening on any given day at Oak Cliff, but there's always something going on. And the exciting news is we're coming to you this winter. Go to oakcliffsailing.org or email me and we will set you up with a tour where we will come, we will coach on anything that we've got going on between match racing, the Olympics, the America's Cup, which they won 2 races today, and we will be able to help design a program in your hometown. Give us a call, 516-802-0368, and we hope to see you soon.
And now back to the show.
Any healthcare news, Jason?
There is. So with Lantheus, back in 2017, as they were raising money to bring their radio diagnostics to market, they out-licensed a cardiac imaging agent to GE Healthcare. So this is a radioisotope tracer that you would use in a PET scan to show the functioning of heart muscles. And I guess the innovative thing with this product is it has a 2-hour half-life, which is about 10 times longer than the existing diagnostics. So this will allow a cardiologist to image the heart, stress test the patient, and then take follow-up imaging and see how the heart responded to that. So GE was responsible for the clinical development of this once they got the license for the product, and they saw it through to approval now. So GE is going to market this globally, and then Lantheus will have a probably low teens royalty payment coming to them. It wasn't public, but they said double digit. So typically it's in the low teens. Some other news that's related to life sciences and tech is there's a couple bills, or there's a bill in Congress right now called the Patent Eligibility Restoration Act. And the goal, from my understanding of it, is to restore patentability to software processes that replicate just processes that people can do by other means. I'm not sure why that's a problem they're trying to fix, but I just see it as opening the door for patent trolls. So I don't really agree with extending the ability to patent software. But I guess a side effect that some analysts are looking at of that is it will invalidate a Supreme Court decision that prevented the patenting of DNA fragments that occur naturally in the body. So potentially, and that decision came down on a company trying to patent the genes related to your being predisposed to breast cancer. So the BRCA, the BRCA1 and 2 genes. So it just seems crazy that they would kind of write this bill in a way that you can patent DNA. Then a little bit of news on Pfizer and kind of tangentially Vertex. So Pfizer pulled a sickle cell drug from the market. This was, I think it was first FDA approved in 2019. And it was supposed to be the first treatment for the underlying cause of sickle cell versus just treating the symptoms of having low oxygenation in your bloodstream. So they found in follow-up studies that the benefit to their drug did not outweigh the risks. Involuntarily submitted that data to the FDA and pulled the drug. So kind of commend them on that. What else is going on? Humana's down today. I don't know if we have that in our memo.
No, we don't have
Yeah.
it. It's an interesting story, though. That
It is.
What is the overall macro impact of that? I mean, I didn't quite, from the news source, I didn't quite understand what was going on in terms of how it affects healthcare expense and hospitals particularly.
Yeah, I don't know the larger impact outside of Humana, but if it was their Medicare Advantage plans, so if you have a plan rated by the CMS as 4 or 5 stars, you get a 5% bonus payment on your enrollments. So the CMS actually downgraded some of Humana's plans from 4.5 stars to 3.5 stars, making them ineligible for those bonuses. And this year, about 90% of their enrollment was in a 4-star or above plan. But due to the changes, next year only 25% will be. So potentially a big hit to their profit margins if they're not receiving their bonus payments on the 75% of their plans. So larger impact, I'm not sure yet, but definitely interesting.
Yeah. Any news on the Vertex? I mean, either their pain medicine or just continuation of trials, I guess.
Yeah, continuation of trials. They really want to seek a broad approval for their pain medication. So they want it to be on soft tissue pain, hard tissue pain, nerve pain, kind of anything that you would need to treat, stronger than, an over the counter drug, maybe not as strong as an opioid, and hopefully, by all appearances, not addictive.
Right.
And I guess I would add that, Vertex's whole strategy is, as we saw with CF, they don't stop innovating where maybe other companies might bring a drug to market and just kind of sit back and focus on commercialization. They have the second and third version of these drugs already in clinical trials. So they're gonna keep running that CF playbook, and as the case in CF, they innovated faster than anyone else in the space. No one could keep up, and eventually their competitors dropped out.
Right. Interesting. Mike, any comment on anything we missed this afternoon?
The only other kind of weird thing that came up was a clinical trial in China. It was a 1 N of 1, but they cured supposedly type 2 diabetes in a patient. So, Jason, I don't know if you have any particular view on that, but we both looked at the information. It's compelling. I mean, it doesn't sound like a scalable approach, but just the fact that it's physically possible is really impressive.
Good. Well, we'll be here 7 days from now, same place, and we'll have one more company. It really is a secret. Mike and Jason and I don't know until Wednesday morning or so which the company. So we'll get through all the Magnificent Seven, and I think in the end it'll be 8, 9, or 10. By the time we get through the 10, it'll probably be time to start again. So we'll make this a feature of each of our Wednesday calls. Take care, everyone. Be well and stay healthy. Bye-bye.
The views expressed on this podcast are the host alone and do not constitute an offer to sell or a recommendation to purchase or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security nor a recommendation for any investment product or service. While certain information contained herein has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, neither the hosts nor any of their employers or their affiliates have independently verified this information, and its accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Accordingly, no representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made as to, and no reliance should be placed on, the fairness, accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of this information. The hosts and all employers and their affiliated persons assume no liability for this information and no obligation to update the information or analysis contained herein in the future, and may or may not hold positions in the securities mentioned.